It only took one joke, one offhand line on Saturday Night Live, and the room exploded. Colin Jost smirked as Harry and Meghan's photo flashed behind him. "All Britain wants is that we keep these two." The laughter wasn't polite. It wasn't scripted. It was raw, the kind of eruption that feels like a pressure valve finally bursting. And in that moment, Meghan Markle's carefully polished image cracked. This wasn't just a comedy bit. It was the mainstream saying out loud what millions had whispered for years. "We're done pretending." For the first time, Meghan wasn't the misunderstood heroine or the silenced royal. She was the punchline. And when SNL treats you like a joke, Hollywood listens. Within hours, the internet went into overdrive. Old, forgotten corners of the web lit up like wildfire. Grainy photos started resurfacing. Late-night yacht parties, champagne flutes in hand, designer bikinis, powerful men always a little too close. The very images Meghan's PR team had spent years and millions trying to erase were suddenly everywhere, unstoppable. And here's the thing, the photos themselves weren't the real problem. Everyone has a past. The outrage came from the cover-up, the obsessive attempt to rewrite her own origin story. Because you can't sell the world a fairy tale about struggle and victimhood while secretly scrubbing half your history from the internet. People don't forgive what you hide. They expose it. The timing made it brutal. Meghan had just launched another lifestyle brand, another empowerment rollout, glossy production, curated Instagram posts, and all the familiar buzzwords, but instead of clicks and applause, she got silence and memes. What had been marketed as authentic now looked like theater. The berry-picking photo shoots, the rented gardens, the perfectly staged smiles, audiences weren't buying it anymore. And the SNL joke? It didn't create the backlash. It put a spotlight on what people already knew. Meghan's team kept pushing the same formula. A new lifestyle brand, a new content pitch, another round of glossy photo shoots and empowerment slogans. But the formula wasn't working anymore. Her problem wasn't sexism. It wasn't racism. It was something more dangerous for anyone in Hollywood. She felt fake. The woman who claimed to be relatable was out in a luxury garden, picking berries in a cashmere sweater. The woman who preached about struggle was rolling out perfectly curated Instagram posts that looked more like ads than authenticity. Audiences weren't rejecting her message. They were rejecting the performance, because when everything looks staged, nothing feels real. And that's why her content kept flopping. It wasn't because people were against her. It was because people didn't believe her. That SNL joke didn't ruin Meghan's reputation. It just confirmed what fans, critics, and even some of her old supporters had been whispering for years. The image didn't match the reality. And once the mask slipped, there was no putting it back on. But this wasn't just about audiences turning cold. Behind the scenes, Hollywood was taking notes. For years, online communities had predicted it. They warned the Oprah interview would backfire. They said streaming giants would eventually grow tired of the endless drama, and they guessed that Meghan's Hollywood allies would slowly vanish. Every single prediction came true. It didn't happen with headlines or press releases. It happened in whispers, in empty inboxes, in quiet phone calls that never came. Ellen, who once praised Meghan as brave and misunderstood, hadn't spoken her name in over a year. The Clooneys, once paraded as close family friends, disappeared from the Sussex story entirely. And Oprah, the woman who handed Meghan her biggest platform, had gone radio silent. No quotes, no posts, not even a birthday mention. That's how Hollywood works. You don't get fired. You get ghosted, because in this industry, silence isn't hesitation. It's calculation. The second you become more of a liability than an asset, you become invisible. And Meghan was vanishing faster than anyone expected. Invitations dried up. Calls went unanswered. Publicists quietly added her name to the do not book list. Not on paper, but in practice. Hollywood didn't need to cancel her. They just stopped pretending she mattered. And if the public had doubts, the industry had already decided. But there was one connection that mattered most, and it was about to snap. Netflix. Netflix had gambled big on the Sussexes. $100 million deal sold as the start of a new media empire. But behind the glossy press releases, the numbers told a different story. Harry's polo documentary barely cracked 500,000 views, ranking in the 3,000s on Netflix's charts. Meghan's own docuseries, despite the media blitz, collapsed after its first week. Viewers clicked out, bored, and never came back. The irony, even Suits reruns, the show Meghan left years ago, were pulling better numbers on the same platform. For Netflix, it wasn't personal. It was math. When you're spending 9 figures, you expect 9-figure returns. And Meghan wasn't delivering. Then came the yacht photos, the resurfaced past, that spread like wildfire online. And for Netflix executives, that was the perfect out. A clean excuse. They didn't need a scandal. They just needed brand misalignment and creative differences. Hollywood code for this isn't profitable anymore. So, quietly, Netflix started floating the idea of letting the deal expire. No renewal, no drama, just a slow fade into the background. Because in Hollywood, loyalty doesn't exist. Only numbers do. And Meghan's numbers were tanking. But Netflix was just the first domino. Once that crack appeared, the rest of the empire began to collapse. Archewell was supposed to be the crown jewel, the production company that would prove Meghan and Harry weren't just celebrities, they were visionaries. Bold, disruptive, the next great media brand. But after Netflix began pulling back, Archewell turned into a punchline in corporate circles. Executives who once pitched 6-figure collaborations were now tacking her name onto internal risk memos. Meghan's brand had shifted from opportunity to liability, and the numbers made it obvious. Low viewership, poor retention, brutal public reception, no engagement, no ROI. In entertainment, those 3 letters, ROI, are death. Suddenly, Archewell wasn't a fresh new voice. It was a warning sign. A company with all the polish, but none of the payoff. Behind the scenes, pressure was mounting. Reports suggested internal documents showed growing panic, how to pivot, how to rebrand, how to keep the illusion alive before the money ran dry. But every attempt only looked more desperate. A new podcast, a lifestyle drop, another reintroduction to the same old Meghan. Each move landed with less impact than the last. Archewell wasn't breaking through anymore, it was breaking down, and Hollywood noticed. But if corporate partners were stepping back, her personal allies were stepping even further away. When the tide turned, her allies didn't come rushing to defend her. They vanished. Ellen, who once called Meghan brave, went quiet. The Clooneys, once paraded as close family friends, disappeared from the narrative completely. And Oprah, the woman who handed Meghan her biggest stage, hadn't so much as reposted a birthday message. That silence wasn't random, it was strategic. In Hollywood, no one makes a scene when they back away. They don't issue statements or burn bridges, they just stop returning calls. And it wasn't just friends. Brands began to ghost her too. Charity organizers quietly pulled invitations. Luxury fashion houses stopped offering dresses for appearances. Sponsors, once eager to be linked with Meghan, suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Her face disappeared from magazine covers. Her name slipped from red carpet guest lists. Even in industry footnotes, she was missing. Because in entertainment, invisibility is the real cancellation, and Meghan was fading faster than anyone expected. But if Hollywood's silence was brutal, what came next was worse. The people who once defended her most fiercely, the fans, started turning on her. The harshest blow didn't come from Hollywood. It came from the fans. These were the people who once fought for Meghan in every comment section, every Reddit thread, every Twitter storm. They defended her against tabloids, critics, even the palace itself. But the loyalty didn't last. One by one, those same fans started pulling receipts, old interviews, staff testimonies, contradictions in her own words. The internet turned into an archive, cataloging every inconsistency. Reddit threads became digital libraries. TikTok creators built entire platforms dissecting the gap between Meghan's branding and her behavior. Influencers who once championed her were now breaking down her contradictions. side by side, frame by frame. And they weren't speculating. They had evidence, screenshots, exit interviews, archived speeches. It wasn't a smear campaign. It was fact-checking in real time. The very narrative that once made Meghan untouchable was now being unraveled by the people who wrote it for her. And just as her fanbase shifted from defenders to investigators, Meghan was preparing her big comeback. But when it finally dropped, the numbers told the truth. Meghan's answer to the backlash was simple: reinvent. Again, a second season of her Netflix content, a shiny new lifestyle brand, a podcast meant to reset the narrative. But every move fell flat. Her Netflix rollout ranked somewhere in the 300s, just over 5 million views since launch. Embarrassing numbers for someone who still branded herself as a global icon. Even Suits, the show she left years ago, was pulling in millions more. Her lifestyle launches were mocked as unoriginal. Critics pointed out eerie similarities to other creators. Her podcast was accused of borrowing too heavily from existing shows. Even her rare public appearances were picked apart, from tone-deaf fashion choices to awkward forced energy. Nothing landed. Nothing felt real. The problem wasn't production. It wasn't PR. It was branding fatigue. Meghan had tried on too many masks: feminist icon, royal rebel, entrepreneur, cultural disruptor, and none of them stuck. Each version contradicted the last, leaving audiences exhausted. Industry insiders saw it clearly. Meghan wasn't an asset anymore. She was a warning, a case study in what happens when the performance becomes bigger than the person, when controlled optics replace authenticity, when the audience stops believing the story you're selling. Her fall wasn't the result of a takedown. No scandalous leak, no orchestrated plot. She collapsed under the weight of her own contradictions. And when the curtain finally pulled back, the fairy tale was gone. For Meghan Markle, the chapter wasn't building toward a comeback, it was closing. It all started with a joke. One throwaway line on Saturday Night Live, and suddenly, the mask slipped. But the truth is, Meghan Markle's downfall didn't happen in a single moment. It was years in the making. The vanishing allies, the failed projects, the contradictions her own fans uncovered, the illusion couldn't hold forever. That SNL joke wasn't the cause. It was the signal, the green light for Hollywood to move on, and the reminder that the audience had already stopped believing. Because in the end, it wasn't the tabloids. It wasn't the palace. It wasn't even her critics. Meghan Markle's brand collapsed under its own weight. And that's the brutal lesson. You can only sell a fairy tale for so long before people start asking for the ending. And for Meghan, it doesn't look like a comeback. It looks like a closed chapter.